Hello, many thanks for joining me on the midweek edition of Journalist Hangout. The general election is just 9 days away, just 9. Now, how ready are you for the polls? Now, today on the program, the Supreme Court strikes out Senate's suit against President Buhari's suspension of Onnoghen as suspended CJN files fresh application challenging CCT chairman's integrity. At Fahishe's trial, Obanikoro says the suit is billions, not illicit. And later on the show, bandits kill Senator Marafa's sister, 14 others in Zamfara state, as a professor blames bad governance, parenting for Boko Haram insurgency. I'll be hanging out with Adekunle Yusuf and Sam Ibemere. I'm Sulaiman Alede. Journalist Hangs Out starts now. Well, the legal battles in the trial of the suspended Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Walter Onnoghen, over alleged false assets declaration is taking different forms. Some of the legal fireworks ignited by the case had been decided. Others rage on, while one has been withdrawn. Now, the Senate has withdrawn the case it filed at the Supreme Court of Nigeria for proper interpretation of the suspension saga. Now, this prompted the Apex Court to strike out the suit challenging President Muhammadu Buhari's suspension of Justice Onnoghen. Now, no reason, however, was given for the withdrawal, but the suspended CJN is fighting on in the battle to save his career as well as reputation. Now, he's filed a fresh application challenging the integrity of the chairman of the Code of Conduct Tribunal, Justice Danladi Umar. Now, in a motion filed by his team of lawyers, Justice Onnoghen described the CCT chairman as a biased and tainted arbiter, asking him to disqualify himself from the trial. Well, gentlemen, good to have you again on the show.
Yeah, my pleasure.
How is this playing out? Looking at 9 days to election, looking at all the fireworks leading up, following the aftermath of that suspension. Let's start with you, Ibemere.
The Onnoghen saga is some brand of politics never seen in our climes.
You think it's politics?
Yeah, for a long, long while. And it's so because the pace at which the entire issue, is evolving is one you can, aptly describe as very frenetic. Too many things appear to be happening at the same time. The decision of the Supreme Court to strike out the case didn't come to me as, totally as a surprise, because before then, the Senate, had withdrawn the case, so it was natural that the Supreme Court was going to strike it out. But again, you ask yourself, what are the reasons? And the one that is out there in the public is the Senate, led by Bukola Saraki, saying that since the matter had gone before the NJC, that it was only natural, given their conviction that the NJC would, handle this matter, dispassionately, in their view, that it was necessary, to take the matter away from the Supreme Court. Yeah, so, like I said, a lot of politics, in place, and what I see, is some resort to self-help on the part of, the major gladiators, the part of the presidency, on the part of Justice Onnoghen, and you won't be too far from it if you say that there is resort to self-help, and that's because before this time, the CJN appears to have deployed a lot of technicalities, which often we are told is allowed in law, to buy time and all that, and the presidency being very, very unsettled about the approach to, the attempt to throw wedge, in the entire, judicial process, appears to want to do a few things, outside the law. So, sorry, the point here is taking the matter to the CCT by the CJN is another way of trying to slow down the pace. Now, the interesting thing to note with the CCT case is that the CJN has alleged that there is a strong likelihood that the CCT chairman is going to be biased because there is this allegation that he has a case which has
I'll come back to you so that I'll need to have your view on that, to the reason as to why he said that. But again, let me come to you, Yusuf. He said that, well, this whole thing is politics. So do you also say it as politics?
Pure politics.
Pure? How pure is this politics?
When you fight corruption, we know what normally happens. But when you pretend to be fighting corruption, you know what will also happen. This is not to say somebody is not corrupt or somebody is corrupt. But in a democracy, you have to follow the rule of law. There has to be due process. Anything outside that, yeah, that's self-help. It does not help any party in a democracy.
So in this case, you still think that who was actually seeking self-help here?
Both parties.
In philosophy, we always have the first cause. I want to say the first cause. Who actually went, seeking for that help?
Okay, let me explain to you. You took this man to CCT. Some will say, no, that shouldn't be the first, step, that it should be NJC. The government said, no, the allegations fall outside is, legal, proceedings, functions as a judge. That is, when you have infractions about this and that, it's no longer about your functions as a judge. Fine. We are saying, if that is true, why don't you do it across the board? The CCT chairman was also involved in a very, very weighty allegation by this same administration, not the last. In fact, the man who speaks for President Muhammadu Buhari's election today, Festus Keyamo, was the one who filed charges against the current CCT, chairman at a high court in Abuja on behalf of EFCC. He didn't do it on his own. He did it. So EFCC filed, a criminal case against
Justice Danladi.
Yes, and they tried to commence the case. How he was alleged to have collected money totaling 10 million naira. That is according to the EFCC, not any other person. The records are there. Why did they discontinue that case?
Well, I think the interesting thing here is when we talk politics, the CCT case, also comes to mind. You failed to mention that, from what we read in the newspapers, that the Attorney General of the Federation, Malami, actually queried Keyamo for filing, for filing that case. Okay, and then the case had to be withdrawn. Now you ask yourself,
the case was not withdrawn. It was abandoned in the court.
There's a report that was published a couple of days back by PR Nigeria saying that Justice Danladi Umar does not have any case because that case has been withdrawn by the AGF. That's what the report says. It was published about 2 days ago. So it says a lot about the undercurrent. Why is the presidency in a hurry to absorb a man who has been alleged to be involved in corruption? Okay? So Could it be that Justice Danladi Umar himself, may have made certain concessions because he's fighting for his career? So these are the questions.
It brings us to what the CJN has said. CJN Onnoghen has said, look, you don't have any moral justification to sit over this matter.
Yes.
You think?
Yeah, the background to it is, I wouldn't know if the CJN himself is aware of this report that I've just talked about, okay, which apparently was put out there to prepare grounds for what the pro-presidency team, appeared to have felt was going to happen. And that report was put out, that Justice Danladi Umar doesn't have any case because the presidency, led by the AGF, appears not to be interested in the case anymore. And that is to prepare grounds for Umar, to take charge of the case without any blemish.
Let me add a little to that. When the matter, was filed, the case was filed, the chief judge of the High Court assigned the case to himself. But at some point, he had to assign the case to another court. Then the query issue came in, separately, one for the acting chairman of EFCC, then one for Festus Keyamo, who is speaking for President Muhammadu Buhari's re-election campaign. You see, nobody has withdrawn that case.
Then that question...
It's better to say it was abandoned. But why we are saying this is that you allowed the suspended CJN to make a case for himself, because if there had not been any case against Umaru, probably the case would have started by now. And the beauty of Code of Conduct Tribunal matter is it does not drag on, like our EFCC trials that may take 10 years, because we have some former governors who are...
Some will disagree with you, because this seem to, they have adjourned a couple of times, and it seemed to be taking the same,
No, it can't.
The same phase
it can't take long.
What you're trying to say is not.
No, it can't take long. Watch all their trials. I'm not saying they should convict or, accuse, anybody within 24 hours. You have some rights in law to make one or two excuses, but it does not take long, because the allegations are always not many.
I think we should also remember that. The reports out there too, that the Nigerian Bar Association appears to be seeking a political solution to it. There were reports that there were, visitations to the presidency, the NBA meeting with the VP and all that, trying to find a way around it. So I think that there are attempts to buy time on the part of
when you say sorry to cut you there. When you say there are attempts to buy time, could this also mean what others are saying about the president of the NBA, asking him? It looks like
it's very messy,
a mess, hitting the fan, and everyone gets stained, and that's what it seemed. Because now that they're talking about this, in any case, first instance, Chairman Danladi Umar is not a judge. That's what has been cleared, that he's not a judge. He's a chairman of the tribunal. And they went further to say the NBA president should also, excuse himself from that position.
Yeah, because there are allegations that he's also involved in some, corrupt or very sharp practice, with his own...
He's facing trial. He's on trial.
So that's the point that we're making, that, like you said, it's a mess, really. The NBA chairman has a case, allegedly has a case. The CCT chairman has a case. The CJN has a case. And then you ask yourself,
who doesn't have a case?
What has become of our judiciary? Okay, we all agree here that there's a huge rot that needs to be cleaned up. But in doing that, do you want to resort to self-help, or you want to allow processes and procedures, to play out? And I think that if we are intent on building very strong institutions for our society, we must be patient. to test our institutions. Allow this entire saga to go through the processes, and then we'll see how, how it all plays out. And that's why I'm bothered about, what happened when the Senate, led by Saraki, took the matter to the Supreme Court, and the caucus, the APC caucus within the National Assembly said, no, you didn't have our support to go to the National Assembly. And I'm like, for goodness sake, why don't you want to go to the Supreme Court to have this tested? And then we'll resolve this matter once and for all. There are just too many things that the National Assembly or the presidency need to get the Supreme Court to sort out.
Don't forget that the NJC met, and that meeting, we just can't throw that away. For so many people, they're saying, bravo to the NJC for coming with that decision to say, I think both of you should...
There was a query, they were given 7 days to...
And it looks like the 7 days should elapse this week.
Let me tell you, the fact that the Senate went ahead to withdraw that case makes me unhappy. Let the Supreme Court test our laws. Some of us saying the president erred by doing this would naturally apologize. If the Supreme Court says Mr. President has a right to do what he did, why are we afraid of testing our laws? Those who said the president is right to do what he did, we said, yes, we told you. That's the beauty of democracy. And if anybody wants to say he or she is a Democrat, we should allow, opportunities to test our laws.
I think that's where the media really comes in. We need to continue to raise our voices. The civil society too, we need to continue to raise our voices. But what you see is incidents of this nature, happen. We make noise for one day and everybody relaxes and all that. So it worries me really. Like I share his like I already expressed that worry, that I just can't come to terms with the fact that this matter was taken to the Supreme Court. And then somehow parties are saying, no, we're not interested. I'll give you a similar example. There have been claims between the presidency and the National Assembly over who has authority to tamper with the budget. At some point, we were told that the president was going to go to the National Assembly to seek clarifications and all that. Nobody is asking questions. And then the next budget cycle, we're going to go back to the issue of, no, you don't have right to tamper with the budget. You have right to tamper with the budget and all that. So
I think a minute here, because this program is actually being aired on different platforms. But for now, TVC News will take a break off journalist Hangout to join a live coverage of a program. But for those still on other platforms, we'll continue with the show, and we're looking at what's happening, the imbroglio that is involving the suspended CJN, as well as a lot of other people looking at a twist from the Senate, and also, bring it before the people, letting people understand again that according to the three gentlemen here, they say it is politics, and for Adekunle, he calls it pure politics. And how pure that politics has been on this matter is what Sam is trying to unravel. And let's quickly wrap up on this and move to other issues. How do you think this can actually help, us better understand the laws now that it's been withdrawn, which has deprived you of the chance of seeing it being tested, at the Supreme Court?
Okay, I think the first thing to admit here is that we are experiencing what many have termed constitutional democracy. At the heart of it is the rule of law. Without the rule of law, you can't possibly be practicing democracy the way it is practiced all over the world. So what am I talking about? If we agree that is at the heart of this is the rule of law, we need to allow our institutions to be tested. We need to be patient as a people. Of course, there are technicalities involved in law. Fine, it could take a while. People say the wheel of justice grinds, very slowly. No doubt about it. It could take a year, it could take 2 years, it could take 3 years. But once the precedent is set, then it is all resolved. We won't go back to it. If it occurs sometime in the future, we'll have said, no, the case between this suspended CJN and Onnoghen versus the federal government of Nigeria was settled this way. And then, you set the precedents, and that helps society stabilize in some way.
And what's your take on this? How can we find a resolution?
I am thoroughly unhappy that the Senate withdrew that case.
Feel that unhappiness.
No, I know. I'm not happy. And it says a lot about the state of our country, that up to now, no individual or group beyond the Senate has gone to God that, oh, let's test this. It does nobody any harm when we test our laws. At least it will prove that at least we are moving, we are advancing, we are growing. Anything short of that, we are just messing up.
Well, I think someone is actually trying to clarify some issues which I raised earlier on. Yes, Mr. Danladi Umar is not a judge. He's never been on the bench, but he is a lawyer. So it's really, try to refer to him as a judge. Well, when we return, Obanikoro says Dasuki's billions not illicit at Fayose's trial. You stay with us. Good to have you join us again on Journalist Hangout. Now, among the political class, especially in our democratic climate, the blood of common interest among the politicians, usually thicker than water, call it political loyalty. So what drives your actions and inactions is purely personal interest. So this is playing out between the former governor of Ekiti State, Ayodele Fayose, and his friend, Mr. Obanikoro, former Minister of State for Defense. Obanikoro now serves as the state witness against his friend, whether you want to put a former friend, but this, perhaps, maybe they're still friends, but Fayose doesn't seem to like that in court. But this is over a case of money laundering, and Nigerians are watching. Obanikoro also shook the table just a bit at the continuation of his cross-examination in the trial at the Federal High Court in Lagos on Tuesday, when he said the 4.6 billion naira sent to him from the Office of the National Security Advisor in 2014 was not illicit fund. Is it or not? It's left for the court to decide. Or what do you think, gentlemen? Let me start with you, Yusuf.
I'm not a security expert.
No, we're talking about the money.
But we have interacted with many security, top shots to know that a lot of fund is always involved in security circles. They spend a lot of money, most of which you can never, ever account for, because they normally leave no traces. If it comes back to say the money is not illicit, it may turn out that he knows what he's saying. Look at the chain of people involved. What they were said, what was said, and the money was spent for. That's the problem with expenditures on security. Look at the security votes our people collect every month. They don't audit it. As long as the state is still in peace, is still existing, they are spending
based
money.
on this, I think we'll be fine to talk more on security votes now, because so that this is sub judice now because it's in court. So I just don't want to look at that action per se. But now he's raised a very important point. He said, even though he's not an expert, usually there's this canopy that a lot of funds go in, and it's lost in the word security vote.
Which they didn't even spend on security.
Let's hear Sam's take on that.
One cannot but feel pity for Obanikoro. He's in very serious dilemma, no doubt about it. Here you have a man who, one-time defense minister, fighting for his political life. Even though this is sub judice, you want to live with certain truths and certain facts. Most of the guys we call politicians are basically career politicians. They don't have any other thing that they do. He knows he's in deep shit. Of course, this whole thing is going to...
Let's swap that to mess.
Yeah.
Deep mess.
Deep mess. Sorry about my language. And this thing has to be, it has to be sorted out, some way. He says the money in question is genuine. You know, I find that very laughable. Laughable in the sense that we all know what happened, except we want to pretend. You know, in 2015, how the Treasury was let loose, and so much money was plundered. Now, he can argue and tell us that as a defense minister and in charge of our securities, a lot of money is spent, and then because of the nature, the strategic nature of security operations, you don't want to reveal a few things. But the question to ask Obanikoro is, how come those monies ended up in your private accounts? Very important. You can't wish that away. And he has admitted that. So you can't wash this money clean under the pretext of they were used for security operations. It becomes dirty. The money becomes dirty the moment it finds its way into your private account.
If they had the TSA in place, single treasury account in place at that point in time, do you think that would have helped? Because when you talk about monies coming into people's private accounts to run their ministries, agencies, or parastatals, because that is what this has pointed to, if we say, okay, that's what it is meant for, it's for security, but it was found in your account, would TSA had, been able to, stop or block such kind of movement coming into some private accounts?
Remember, the office of NSA coordinates all the security forces in the country. This means a lot of money. Even when you have TSA, the peculiarity of security management. They don't wait for this or that. As long as the president approves, the money can move. So a lot of money goes into security management that nobody discusses. I mentioned the security votes our governors collect. Some even say local government people also do something like that. But who accounts for this money? Who has ever?
Because we recall once upon a time, once upon a time,
let them, when they audit their account,
when they audit their account. In southwest of Nigeria had an issue with the governor, and it had to do with the security vote saying.
Yeah, and he wanted
he wasn't, sending part of the money to this individual who would have helped him keep the peace.
They use the money for whatever they like.
No, but they shouldn't use the money for whatever they like. We're saying that there is need for accountability. Okay?
Absolutely.
Yes, we need to secure our country. Okay? But then there ought to be processes. I mean, we're not living in an environment where
they abuse the
yeah, that's what I'm talking about. But the abuse has to stop. Now, let me just take us back a little. It took my governor, the very popular one who calls himself my governor of Imo State, Okorocha, to tell us that what was allocated for our security votes when he became governor was about 4 billion.
Monthly?
And that he was going to say, that he was going to say
a certain percentage.
Yeah, that he was going to say 50% of that. Now, if we follow this argument, that the nature of security issues, challenges are such that you don't leave any trace and all that. Now, the man says, I'm going to save 50% of this money, about 2 billion naira, and channel it into something else. So imagine if others in his shoes had taken this initiative. So what we're basically asking for is that...
still doing that?
I wouldn't know, but again, political gimmicks all over the place. So what we're basically asking for is accountability. No matter the nature of the operations, we must put in place structures that will get our public officers, because we know that they are prone to abuse.
I also recall that was the essence of talking about structures. That was why your governor then did say he was going to put aside some of these monies to put some infrastructural development, especially in terms of education. I'm sure that has been done in your state.
That should be queried. I'm not in a position to tell how much of that was channeled and how effective, it was in terms of developing infrastructure across the different sectors of the economy. But what we're saying basically here is that for whatever it is worth, we should not allow public officers or officials to have unlimited access to funds that they won't account for. I don't think that in any civilized environment that is what obtains. So we shouldn't, it has to come to a stop. That's my argument, really.
But again, let's put this into perspective. If we say they get that much monthly as security vote, how come that we still see some states have, go out to have this endowment, fund, seeking and reaching out to the private sector to fund the security, of their states if they had such amount of money? So it comes back to what Yusuf has said, that money is usually spent.
Abused. For some of the abuse. That
for patronage, basically. Patronage.
You see, the government declared the money as illicit. The sitting government. You initiated trial. Dasuki, what's the name of the former NSA? If the trial had been concluded by now, possibly, maybe we will have known whether that money is illicit money or clean money. Because if you listen to Obanikoro, he said he deserved a national award for what he did, not, unfortunately, when you want to do trial for these kind of things, it's very difficult because a lot of things cannot or will not be allowed, to come into the public domain. You know what has happened to Dasuki's trial? You know.
I don't know.
But you know.
I do not know.
I think what we know really is that the man has been in detention, and several court orders asking that he should be granted bail have not been obeyed.
That's not fair.
And that's why we keep talking about politics in all the issues that have come up for discussion today. But we can't wait for too long. These matters have to be trashed. Obanikoro today, it could be some other person tomorrow. But what we're saying is that you could tell from the confessions or the things that Obanikoro is said to have, said at the courts, that he has difficulty. He's in some kind of dilemma where he has difficulties, looking Fayose in the face and saying to him, "You're my friend, but in this matter, I really don't want to, expose so much and all that." So you find that there is some kind of understanding that between us, I think we need to make this case go in such a way that, we all come clean. And I think that's why, he's raising the issues of this is clean money, it was meant for operations, just like some huge amount was stacked at somewhere in Ikoyi and all that.
Now, off the top of my head, I'm thinking if this is one of the reasons people come into politics, especially people come in to seek, votes to become governors. So I'm talking about security votes, because that alone in itself is some kind of money that could turn a nation into, a paradise. True. It comes back to what you have highlighted, because I really want us to stay on this a little bit before we move on, because it has a connection into what we'll be looking at pretty much later. We have a security challenge in our hands as a nation, even in all states. It's either you get into talk about armed bandits and a couple of other people. So how would this? I think I have a caller calling from Edo State. Good to have you join me on Journalist Hangout.
Hello. Well, I want to say something.
Go ahead, Nelson.
Yeah. If there's no law against that security vote, how can you say they're committing any offense? Until there's a law stipulating that when you use the money outside what the law says, that's when you say somebody has committed an offense. So we should educate people. They should not confuse people. Until there's a law, there's no offense. Then two, the issue of, let me just give an instance. If a friend of mine goes to the bank to rob, I'm not aware that he robbed the bank. and he knows I have a problem, he gives me some part of the money which I was spending. Am I an armed robber? Or is my friend that armed robber?
The courts will try that.
So these are the issues that we need to educate people. The person who went to the bank to rob is armed robber. My friend gave him money. I don't know the source of his money. Am I a criminal?
All right, Nelson, I think points made for Nelson.
I think you got his point.
Yeah, but
The point, no, if you listen to him very well, that there's nothing bad in security votes, that until we have a law which says if you spend security vote for something outside security, it becomes this. We haven't had...
So if you're a troublemaker, for instance, if you're a troublemaker, maybe in a local government area, you know how we have some of these people, you call them thugs, miscreants, and you're a troublemaker. And if the governor decides to give you maybe 10 million out of it just to make you keep peace within your own enclave.
That is security.
That is keeping the peace, and that is security.
That is part of security votes.
which is what we're saying that we shouldn't tolerate. I really don't buy into the argument that says if your friend robs and gives you and you don't know he didn't rob, then that makes you free. Ignorance can be pleaded in this matter. It's not tolerated in law. So I think we need to get that clear. The beauty of the Obanikoro case is that it's before the courts, okay? And I trust that the courts are going to look at the issues and at the end of the day establish if there were acts of impunity or if there was abuse of office. I think that our laws are very clear on that. The most important thing is that we take our time to test the efficacy of these laws that have been made. But as far as I'm concerned, access to public funds shouldn't be such that in the name of whatever function, in the name of whatever activity officially that has been assigned to you, that you just dip your hand and walk away because these are security issues. I think that the system must find a way of dealing with that. Very important. Otherwise, we'll find that what would motivate a lot of people to want to get into public office will be to get in there because there are lapses, dip your hand into the treasury and walk away because there are no laws. We can't continue that way as a country.
And you said this one is just, being, going in circles, and that you would love to see a closure to this particular case.
You'll be surprised when the court eventually pronounces on this case. You'll be extremely surprised that at the end of the day.
Let's not go there.
No, I'm not going to tell you what the court will say.
But we'll be surprised.
But you'll be surprised.
We'll be surprised.
You know, I know the matter is before the court.
Yeah,
because the problem we have, we love to put the wrong people in public office. For security's sake, it's very difficult to say, okay, you must make it very difficult to access funds, to do this, to that. You have to. But do you put the right people in public office? We don't. So we will continue to have abuses and abuses, in public office until we decide that let's put some of our best in public office.
In putting some of our best, how can we actually get them out there?
Very, very tough question, because the good ones appear to shy away from politics. I'm sure if you were asked to run for an office, you tell your friend that it's too dirty, you don't want to get into it. But again, back to the argument. See, whatever the courts decide on this matter, I still believe that it's going to move us a step forward, because if a gap is noticed, then it provides an opportunity for the system to say, no, to check this in the future, we need to promulgate, I hope that's not a military term, we need to enact fresh laws that will bring checks and balances within the system. So whichever way it goes.
Gentlemen, they're very, very careful about their words and the language. Anyway, when the program returns, pretty much later, we have a whole lot to look at, and that will be looking at the atmospheric, condition of what exactly is playing out in our politics, looking at the environment, how it has become too unfriendly for the giant tree to withstand the atmosphere. Then what hope is left for the little shrubs? This big question is looking at insecurity in Nigeria when it does begin to claim the lives of the high and the mighty in the society, then the plight of the ordinary Nigerian becomes glaring. Suspected armed bandits have killed the elder sister of the lawmaker representing Zamfara Central Senatorial District, Senator Kabiru Marafa. The killers did not stop there. They went on to abduct her husband as well as her brother. When they stormed the home in Ruanboro community of the Dusau local government area of the state, they also invaded another community where they set houses on fire, killed many, abducted several other people. In the meantime, a professor has attributed Boko Haram insurgency and other forms of insecurity in states like Borno, Yobe, and Adamawa on bad governance and poor parenting. The Vice Chancellor of Yobe State University, Professor Yakubu Mukhtar, said such states would continue to sit on a time bomb if people continue to give birth to children without adequate and proper care. So, gentlemen, when we come back, that's what we'll be looking at. Good to know you're still there watching Journalists Hangout, and for our viewers watching on TVC News, welcome back to the show. Now, very quickly, before we went on that short break, we were talking about what has happened in Zamfara State that has led to the death and kidnap of a couple of people, specifically even the family of Senator Kabiru Marafa is also involved in all of this. It brings us to what we were talking about. Security votes, money is meant to be used. But again, let's look at security, especially in Zamfara State, and talk about the armed bandits that have taken over some couple of local government areas of Zamfara State.
Zamfara is indeed a very sorry case at the moment. But first, I'd like to say my condolences to Senator Marafa, who lost a sister and had the in-law, abducted. Interestingly, there have been some intervention, on the part of the states. I'm aware that a couple of thousands of security operatives have been deployed to Zamfara. But are we getting results? Maybe what happened is an indication that we may not have a very perfect case on our hands. Incidences of banditry here and there. You can't totally rule these things out. But again, we need to reconcile the investment, in trying to manage the security, challenges and what we are getting, as outcome. It's indeed very sad. Unlike what we have in the Northeast, it's been acknowledged that what is playing out in Zamfara is a pure case of, banditry, and that's why we're talking about kidnap for ransom. I hear that the people who picked up the man are already asking for several millions. So you could tell that it's just a case of people who are, if you like, maybe jobless, who don't have something to do, are in a desperate, situation and want to take advantage of
I think
lapses.
to me, it looks like deja vu. I come to you, Yusuf. It looks deja vu. Yeah. Some issues occur, and very quickly, the security agencies are telling the nation what they think it is, and sometimes it, goes on to metamorphose into something different from what they have told the nation that it was. So looking at what is happening, and bandits taking, running riot in Zamfara State, people are being killed, people are being kidnapped. And this is an election year, just a few days to an election. Do you think this will definitely upset, the peaceful run of elections in places like Zamfara?
It's likely, most likely. it's not new in Zamfara. It's been there for more than 1 year. It didn't start last year, but it became, you know,
More pronounced.
totally unacceptable. It reached an unbearable levels last year. Remember the governor of that state, you know, who happens to be the chairman of Nigeria Governors Forum, at a point, you know, threw his hand up like this, that after he has done virtually all a state governor can do, nothing worked. At a point, the governor was even literally saying that he wanted to leave his seat. That if you can declare state of emergency, if that will bring peace to this state, you know, embrace it in any way. For a man on, you know, in office saying this, believe me, that problem must have reached a terrible level. You remember around December last year, you see Zamfara residents, you know, demonstrating, calling on the authorities that help us do something. So it's so bad in that place. Some people will tell you it's kidnappings. Yes, it's kidnapping. Some people will tell you it's all these criminals who take people's cattle, cattle rustlers. It is. Some people will tell you armed robbers. You have them. So it's a multi-pronged, you know, problem in Zamfara. The president has done several things, you know, ordering the army to do something, ordering the Air Force to join. The last overseas IG that just left now, you know, he was ordered several times, nothing. I don't know what to do in Zamfara. Maybe they need to call the leaders, political and traditional rulers in Zamfara together. This is beyond just sending military there. The president has done that several times. Peace has eluded that state. The Air Force, go and do it so that you can, you know, do here mobilization for the soldiers. It has not helped. Oh, go and cite one battalion, go and cite one divisional this, all that. There's still no peace in Zamfara. People are not safe.
What I don't get there is, for instance...
So this is beyond security votes now.
We're not talking about Boko Haram.
Yeah.
So we're not talking about people using sophisticated weapons. So even talking about the Air Force sometimes doesn't even come into the equation. So how come that till this moment we still have not been able to arrest the situation of those who seem to be, you know, armed bandits who just overrun and outrun communities and get away with it?
Bad governance is at the root of it, and we just need to go back a little in time. You know, when a problem or a challenge sprouts, you want to deal with it at that point in time. If you don't, it festers. And I think that's what happened, or what played out in Zamfara. You had a governor, and I want to say this, I'm very conscious of the fact that I'm before, you know, live TV. At some point, almost abandoned governance. There were very strong allegations that he was handling that state. And then if you're not there, it means just anything could happen. I mean, the issue here is you're talking about competence, you're talking about character, you're talking about capacity. Did he have that, you know, at play? So the governor cannot completely remove himself from what we are currently experiencing in Zamfara. I mean, here was a man who at some point, I'm sorry I'm digressing, but then we need to talk about these things. Who told the entire world that the reason why people were suffering from cerebrospinal meningitis was because they had committed so much sin and were being punished? And not too long ago, his commissioner for chieftaincy affairs and local government told the citizens that they should pray and fast for 3 days so that they can overcome, you know, the security challenge that they are facing. Now you ask yourself, what manner of leadership is that? It simply shows that he lacks competence, he lacks capacity, and his character comes to question. So these are hard facts. We have to deal with it. But sadly, the matter has festered. And now, to be fair to Mr. President, you want him to nip this problem, to deal with it in one day. Sorry, it's not going to come that easy. But again, we need to persevere. We need to continue to sustain what the government is trying to do in terms of mobilization of our security forces, putting men on ground and getting more creative, working on our intelligence. I believe that if we do the right thing over time, we should be able to address this.
So your final take on this?
Bad governance, as you said. How do we get good governance? Bringing in credible people. During elections, we should bring in credible people into public office. What he said about the state governor was not, to discredit him, but it was true. Yes, it is true. When you look at utterances from political gladiators in Zamfara State, lately, you will know that a lot is happening. They are heating up the politics in that state among themselves. So how do you have peace?
Adekunle Yusuf, Sami Bimeri, many thanks for hanging out with me this evening.
Thank you, my pleasure.
Well, that's all on Journalist Hangout. Join me tomorrow for another episode of the program. You can also watch Journalist Hangout on other platforms showing on the screen and on YouTube at youtube.com/TVC. Our feedback channel is Journalist Hangout at tvcnews.tv. I'm Sulaiman Alede. God bless Nigeria.
Yeah.